Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Live. It's a huge privilege for me to welcome international mediator, lawyer, and professional speaker, Jane Gunn, back to the program. Jane, like many of us, is a lifelong learner, trainer, and a teacher. Thank you for tuning in. Please, could you do me one favor? If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the podcast channel, please follow us. Jane, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your knowledge, wisdom, and street smarts. Jane, what's been happening recently in the rather aggressive world of conflict and mediation?
Well, I've had a busy year so far. I said to you, I'm just doing my VAT, but a pile of invoices here because I've had so many clients to help. Yeah, I don't know what I said last time, but my sense is that we are living in a world that's quite disrupted and full of conflict. We've got global conflict, which we keep being told is brewing. But I think that sense of uncertainty and lack of clarity just percolates down to all of us, makes people uneasy, and that sort of spreads into how people are behaving in their everyday lives at work and at home. It's what I'm seeing, what I'm sensing. And so people are being much more defensive and adversarial than they might otherwise have been, perhaps. But and also I think people feel very uncertain about the future financially as well. I've certainly been working with a few businesses where they're not quite sure, they're struggling financially. That has a knock-on effect, certainly on the way they behave at board level and so on. So yeah, quite a lot going on. I call it a cycle of crisis, age of disruption. I don't know what it is, but we're all in it together. And so I've been thinking about, as I have all through my career, how do the skills and tools and mindset of mediation help all of us to manage all the changes and the challenges and the crises that we might individually come across? What might that look like as a sort of framework and process that we can all hook into when we need it? And I can talk through that today, Derek.
Yeah, that'd be great, Jane. Do you think social media, US presidents being aggressive, Ukraine, is making a difference?
I think it all makes a difference. I mean, one of the challenges and one of the things we don't have from any of our political leaders or any of those social media influencers, whoever they are, is good role models. We have bad role models. We don't see anybody who's actually managing challenging situations well, with humanity, with good emotional intelligence, with good conflict management skills. We don't see that. They don't have those skills, or they don't want to use those skills. And so none of us have got good role models. And of course, if you think that, in fact, a very interesting book I've been reading, which doesn't apply to most of us because I've got grandchildren, not children. Well, both got children and grandchildren, but it was called Hold On to Your Kids. But what's very interesting about this book is that it's looking at, and it's been a progressive thing, over many decades, is that children now are more responsive to their peers. They're more what you might call peer orientated than parent orientated. In other words, for their role models, they look to their peers rather than people of their parent generation who would be older and wiser. They're not looking to elders for their influence. And that's for a number of reasons as to why that happens. But that happens earlier and earlier, that children are being more influenced by their peers. And then you think, well, are their peers qualified to to bring them up, if you like? And then they are more influenced by their peers on social media and by social media and the media, whatever media they're watching generally. So all of that creates a recipe for children who are not grounded and influenced by wise elders. You see, my question is, where are the wise elders? I don't know where they are.
We're here.
We're here.
We're here.
Yeah. But that I think that's lacking in society generally, and that we don't have people to look to. And the other thing I'm constantly saying to people is no one's coming to save us, you know. No one's coming to save us. It's up to all of us to step up and speak up. And this is my big thing. I spoke at an HR conference on whistleblowing the other day, which is a specific area where people need to speak up if they're in an organization and they see that things aren't being done properly. And often they don't speak up for months or even years. But all of us need to speak up actually about things that we are not happy about, and that we think, you know, that we don't agree with, whether that's things our politicians are doing or things that we see in society. I think we're all either too busy or we don't want to put our head above the parapet and speak up. And again, that's because people get shot down on social media. You know, you and I have seen that, Derek. If people speak up on Facebook, they end up with very sort of ugly comments. So people don't know how to have, we don't know anymore how to have dialogue, good dialogue about, you know, where can we have these, what I call big conversations? Where can we discuss some of the big topics of the day on which we don't necessarily agree? We don't need to agree.
Jane, there's a couple of things I just wanted to mention there as you raised it. As I walk for my coffee in the morning, I watch all the children going to school. They're all on their phones. They've all got their heads down. They're all on their phones. I'm looking at their body language. They're either smiling and laughing or they're a bit puzzled. That can't be doing anyone any good at all. Toxic emails are a massive issue. And actually our guest 2 weeks ago was talking about the fact that children can't go down the park and play anymore because it's unsafe physically, but they can do whatever they want to do online, probably at any point, which is very, very scary. And then you mentioned whistleblowing, because whistleblowing is quite dangerous, isn't it? I know that people are worried about whistleblowing. There's still been witch hunts on who's the whistleblower.
Yeah, it's supposed to be protected, but of course there, you know, we can all think of whistleblowers who haven't fared very well because they spoke up. So there's not much to entice us all to be whistleblowers at any level, really. It's challenging. But then we have to think, what are we being complicit in if we don't speak up about things? And, you know, even, well, I've got a friend, colleague, has had to speak up in the NHS about the treatment that her husband went through. You know, that's been challenging. You know, even at that level, if you're not happy with a public service, to speak up about that, and particularly, you know, where it's been very challenging. So, for example, you know, you've had to be an advocate for a relative and you feel that they've been mistreated or they have been misdiagnosed, that requires some courage, actually. You know, it's much easier to put your head down and say, I need to get my life back on track, rather than I need to challenge the authority because they didn't behave appropriately. So you know, we're all in this challenging situation at the moment where there are things we might speak up about, but we don't.
You need help in speaking up, don't you? That is the issue. And people don't have so many colleagues, friends, people they meet in a wine bar or in a coffee shop. I don't think they do, because they're on social media. And you seriously need someone that you can trust, that will give you confidence, like a coach, a mentor, an uncle.
Yes, absolutely.
I was thinking of uncles and aunties earlier when you were saying that.
I mean, that's the point this book makes, actually, is that it's the uncles and aunties who used to be able to help you, you know, where you might not have gone to your parents. Your uncles and aunties and your grandparents would be there, and you would go to them and they would be you know, they would give you the advice. But of course, you know, now people go to AI, don't they? And they go, what would I do in this situation? And that comes the answer. And is that, you know, and previously we would have chatted about these things informally and off the record in the pub or in the coffee shop, or, you know, but now everything, if you happen to chat with your friends, it's all recorded, you know, it's all it's all on the cloud, isn't it? You know, you don't get rid of that conversation. It may come back to haunt you. And certainly people who question things, you know, find the police knocking on their door saying, you know, you've breached some sort of protocol and you're going to jail. You know, that, you know, that we don't have this freedom of speech and the ability to discuss things that are perhaps a little bit controversial.
Sure.
I think we should do. I think we should be able to sort of go down the pub and discuss things, and that's how things would normally have been sorted out, really. And of course, go back to tribal society, and it would be sorted out in the village, really. You know,
By the elders
by the
again.
elders.
By the elders again. We were talking about artificial intelligence when we met last week, Jane, and you said you had a worry about artificial intelligence, maybe, and the people were relying on that too much.
Well, Stephen Bartlett, he does the Diary of a CEO. I think it was him. Oh no, maybe it was Daniel Priestley. Said there are going to be two classes of users of artificial intelligence. One are going to be the consumers. They simply use it to sort of ask rather simple questions and then to simply follow the answer that it gives them. And the second are the creators, who understand how to use it creatively to ask it intelligent questions and then to go on and create, you know, something new from that. But the majority of people are simply going to be consumers. They are just going to ask AI simple questions as if it were just Google, but they will then say, and I think it prevents us then, if we use it in that way, from thinking. So one of the things I'm encouraging people to do is to think deeply, differently, and dangerously. You know, think deeply about things. But if you ask AI a question and it gives you a simple answer, where's the incentive to dig deeper?
And of course, we should always dig deeper with AI. It's not the first question we ask it, it's the follow-up questions and
Yes.
digging deeper. That's a real good power of three, all beginning with D, Jane. I must congratulate you that as a
Differently and dangerously. Yeah, I mean, it's like yours getting the drains up, Derek. You used to say, get the drains up. We need to get the drains up. We do need to, you know, I have in my process, which we might talk about in a minute, the murky swamp of reality, which is where my clients mostly get stuck, and they don't want to go there. They don't even want to think about what the murky swamp of reality is. And that's in mediation. We are thinking about what's the real situation here? What's the brutal truth that you have to face that you're not trying to avoid? And of course, if you go to AI or if you go to HR, for example, in an organization, or if you go to a judge, you're hoping that someone will simply give you an easy answer and you never have to go there and dig around and find the brutal truth and get the drains up and find out.
the murky truth of reality.
The murky swamp of reality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you got an example of that you've done recently?
Let me think.
Sorry, we didn't rehearse that bit, did we?
No, we didn't rehearse that bit. And I always have to be careful that I'm not giving away some sort of secret or something that someone will recognize. But, you know, sometimes it is just the sort of facing the truth of your situation, whether that's a financial reality, whether that, you know, it's the fact that you might, you know, so actually the brutal truth of you speak up as a whistleblower could be that you lose your job. So that is a brutal reality that you do have to go through. So, you know, in my work, it isn't just about helping people to patch things up. It's about understanding what's really going on under the surface. And can they, so the brutal truth might be two people simply can't work together anymore. They just can't. And I used to think my job was to come in and patch it all up and you know, but it isn't. If the brutal truth is they can't work together, then you've got to look at what's the alternative. You know, what could they and what could the organization do that works?
Do you spot that, Jane, in a mediation? You're in there, you know, your brain's going, these people really are the DNA is all wrong between them, you know,
I do spot things, Derek, but there's two key principles, and I suppose this comes back to this part of the model, is two key principles of mediation. One is that it's not my job to make decisions for people or make any judgment or even influence them to make decisions. So we call that self-determination. It's up to them to make the decision. But the second one is fully informed consent. So this is where they've got to go into the, they've got to have all the information they need personally to make that decision. And it's not based on what I think or what anybody else thinks. Have they done the homework? Have they thought about it from their own personal perspective, from the business perspective? Have they done that deep dive, thinking deeply, differently and dangerously to say, actually, I know for me and for the company, if that's the right thing, that this is the right path to take, even though it may be still a challenging decision. So we have to make tough decisions. And more than anything, we all have to make tough decisions in the world we live in. And it's that ability to make tough decisions that I was speaking to someone today, actually, about the fact that, again, we've been schooled into a way of living that's comfortable and convenient. And AI is an example of that, you know, so we're all being told all the time that things could be more comfortable and more convenient. And actually, that's not the way to make tough decisions, to look for comfort and convenience. Sometimes things have to be uncomfortable and inconvenient, and there's still the right thing to do. And, you know, most of us on this call have been brought up in a time where we didn't have central heating years ago, and we didn't have hot showers every morning and all of that, you know, but the world now is at the flick of a button. You've got everything. I watched someone yesterday, and some of us on this call have got, you don't even have to lift your own boot of the car. You press a button and it, you know, I mean, just all of this is about comfort and convenience. And so we don't have to do the heavy lifting. And it's
I was telling somebody yesterday, and they didn't believe me, Jane. For the first 25 years of my life, I lived in a council flat with my mum and dad, and I hadn't had a hot shower. The only time I got a hot shower was when I played sport.
Absolutely.
Really, their body language didn't believe me.
Yeah. I don't think my children believe me. I mean, I didn't. Well, we didn't have a shower for sure. We didn't have a bath every week for sure. You know, it wasn't. Yeah, and that was just normal in those days. You know, we just didn't have central heating. My mother never drove. My father didn't have a car for years. I literally walked everywhere. We walked miles to school.
Yeah.
No tracking, no tracing. Nobody knew where we were all day. And, you know, I think that was good for resilience, good for building toughness. And so, you know, now, you know, the idea is that we should have tabs on our children all the time in case, but they have to learn. So it's challenging, isn't it? The world we've created is one that's obsessed with comfort, convenience, and safety.
And yet it's looking more dangerous all the time.
Yeah.
When we look at the news and what's happening, etc.
Well, I never look at the news, Derek. That's one of my other principles, is don't watch the TV.
Well, I mean, you are quite right, and I do get that. But
I don't watch the TV anymore. I haven't watched it for about 5 years.
So how do you get your news? You need to know what's going on in the world to be
well, you know, there's plenty of, you just need to read some headlines on.
Yeah.
You don't really need to, because I mean, who influences the storyline, the narrative? That's another one of the sort of principles of mediation, is understanding that there's more than one narrative. In most situations, if you only read one source of news, you're only getting one narrative. There are many narratives, you know, and if you were to go to one of the countries that's in conflict and speak to the local people there, you'd get a different narrative than the one we get on the BBC News. And so how do we dig deeply into global situations where we're being presented with one narrative? I don't know the answer to that, but, you know, that's the challenge that we all have in trying to understand the global situation and respond to it.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Very difficult. So how do you build rapport when you go into a mediation? You don't know one side, you don't know the other side. You must be a bit apprehensive, however confident you are when you walk into that situation. Everybody is when they don't know anyone.
Yeah, well, take chocolates to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is just about being partly about being personable and understanding that most people think it's going to be more formal and more scary than it is. So sort of acknowledging that, maybe asking them perhaps, how do you feel about today? It's just those little side conversations that we've all forgotten how to have, I think, Derek. You and I had a little bit of a chat before we go online, but I know a lot of my clients these days, if they have a Teams or a Zoom meeting, it's very functional. They forget to do that bit that we might have done around the coffee table before we started the meeting. And so it is that little thing about, I get there really early, make sure I've set up the rooms, make sure I'm there, make sure I welcome people. I've often said in the training that I give, if you're running a meeting and in particular mediation, think about it as a dinner party. I'm giving a dinner party. And so I need to be ready when everybody comes. I need to think what they need to be comfortable, which is all sorts of things, thinking about, is the room hot or cold, or have they got the drink that they need? That kind of thing that you do when people arrive at your house is my job, I think, and just making sure that they just start off well, and they're going to get grumpy later probably, but we just got to start being friendly, welcoming, checking for their comfort.
And that's how you deal with their nerves, presumably, because I was in a mediation as an advisor. I think I told you about 2 months ago, and 2 or 3 of the people were really nervous, and one of the people was really aggressive, and there was a lawyer in there who never said a word but was watching every move. So it was kind of odd, really. I enjoyed it because I was watching. I was in the passenger seat.
The other thing that I do sometimes is, and it's open to me to do, is to take a trainee mediator with me. So there's lots of mediators who, they can come as an assistant and they can be my eyes and ears, because what I'm doing from moment to moment is taking in the information, the body language and everything else, as you say, spotting whether someone's looking a bit nervous or looking as though they need a break, and having someone else with me, particularly if there's lots and lots of people, can really help. I can tell you this one, I had a funny mediation probably about 6 weeks ago, and the venue was a hotel. And the parties didn't want to meet each other, didn't even want to set eyes on each other. So one had a room at one end of the bar, and then there was a long bar and restaurant, and then at the other end was another room. And I did have an assistant with me, and this one went on till 3 a.m, Derek. So it was all day, and I'd stayed the night before to start early, and then they had to find me a room that night because obviously I couldn't drive home at 3 a.m. But all day long until 3 a.m, we were going up and down through the bar with our papers tucked under our arm, and there were a group of 3 women having lunch, ladies who lunch, and they stopped us and they said, could we just ask you, are you running a marathon? And then they stopped us again and said, please tell us what it is that you're doing. And we said, well, we can't really tell you, but we're liaising.
Liaising.
But they were desperate to know, why were we running up and down the bar with papers tucked under our arm? It was very funny. And then we had to find a way, we settled it. We had to find a way for one of the parties to then exit the building without seeing the others and without meeting them in the car park. So that can be part of it too, that, people just,
let's run the tape back. Oh, that shows how old I am. I shouldn't say that. Let's run the podcast back a bit, Jane. And on that one, 3 a.m. Now, how did you stay awake? How did you keep your body energies up? How did you keep everybody in the room, mentally?
It was a challenge, and they needed to sign up that day, otherwise it wouldn't have settled. I think that they'd probably have sort of gone off the boil. So actually, my thing is, one of the things that people tend to do a lot in mediation, so that they start ordering pizza, which is a disaster because then everybody falls asleep. Have a great big carb loaded pizza. I actually, again, I take food with me. So I've got food that I know that will sustain me, that is not loaded with stuff that's going to send me to sleep. I mean, I knew I wasn't safe to drive home, but I was safe to stay. You know, I was still able to mediate at that time. It's the latest I've ever mediated. But yeah, at the end of the day, we were just, one of the lawyers there needed his senior to approve the contract they were writing up. So there was that going on. And then, of course, all the systems had gone down and we needed actually to print it because they wanted a top copy. So we were getting the hotel to sort of boot up their system and print it off. And it was pages and pages long. So it was quite...
wow.
Quite complicated, but they kept coming up with, it was a corporate issue, and they kept coming up with sort of loan agreements that they needed to sort of check. And we just needed to stick with it because we couldn't. I always say that if you break a mediation, it's like breaking for rain at Wimbledon. You never know what racket people are coming back with. So, yeah.
Yeah, so basically people stayed in that room, they went out for a bit of fresh air and...
Well, they were in two separate rooms, yes, and they stayed in their rooms until that time. They did order some food, and that was how it was. Yeah, so it was a long mediation.
Wow, well done. Well, congratulations. I can see why you're so fit, Jane, running backwards and forwards.
I can't remember how many steps. I think we recorded how many steps we'd done that day. 1,000.
You probably did 15,000 steps that day.
Something like that.
Any
yeah.
problem at all. Jane, we're nearly at the end of the interview. I'm always so grateful for you coming back and joining us and sharing some of your... but if you had one tip for people this year, in the second half of this year, watching this, what would it be?
I think it's question everything. Be prepared to speak up about things that you're not sure about. Be prepared to challenge, the narrative and explore different ideas. The way that we would have done down the pub, chewing the fat, tossing things backwards and forwards. How can we do that? We need to just sort of almost find people to have those conversations with. And I'd quite like to start something like that. I think I'm going to run a webinar next week, actually, so may I put that in the box? We're going to start the ball rolling on you being able to use this process yourself, but also have a kind of drop-in clinic where people can come with their challenges. So I'll drop that. I think I've got the right thing. I'll drop that in the box, but always happy to hear from anybody, and always lovely to be on your show, Derek.
Jane, you're very kind. Put that in the box, and I'll put it I'll put it on YouTube or in the podcast notes.
Fabulous. There we go. There it is. That's my webinar.
So will you stay on and answer a few personal questions from people?
Yes. So it's from I think it's called From Chaos to Clarity or something like that.
Jane, thanks for joining us. I hope you'll join us again towards the end of the year. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and I always learn lots of things. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to see some familiar faces. Thank you, Godfrey. Thank you.